So I took one sikh on Parshas Achrei and one sikh on Parshas Kedoshim. Both of them are short, and together they're medium sized. The pasuk Mishmartim Mishmartim Nemer b'Gemara Asu Mishmeres leMishmarti. The Gemara wants to know why is it used a double expression. Ushmartem es Mishmarti. You do the mitzvahs. What's this? You got to guard my things that I was made of mishmeres. So it means you have to make a gate, a siyag, a Torah like we have in Pirkei Avos. Kan yisoidam shal agdorim v'asyagim derabanan v'gam, not just what the Chachomim made, shal agdorim v'asyagim shekol Yehudi chayiv ligdor atzmei behem. Like it says in Pirkei Avos, asu siyag v'Torah is not just a chiyuv on the Chachomim. That the Chachomim have a mitzvah, they have to make certain Gezeuros. When they see that a community or a situation or a time has come that you need to ensure that something shouldn't go wrong, so they say, let's make a Gezeuros. Not only that, every person individually, as an individual, needs to make for himself a gate, a gather. I feel how come? Why is that a way to do things? You do 100 things, you steps, 100 gates, 100 levels, you move back in heter so that you shouldn't chas v'shalom fall through in Isser. A very interesting lashon that the Rebbe uses also in the Yiddish. The Divas Machna Toes, the Rebbe says. And they say, L'shemayish l'chapes chumres chadoshes. Im b'yachzot dvarim shenes right there, Rebbe saying, Shebechol dor namar, loy sasim radavar sheyagidu l'cham. True, when it comes to the things that the Chachomim said, in every generation, Chachomim come up and make a certain Gezeuros that might not have been 100 years ago. You say, Ma hayom yamayim, but this is what the Chachomim made. And there is a loisasem in Torah not to follow what the Chachamim of the generation say, because it says loisasur ma'adavar she'yigid locha. And a different place it's brought down to some mitzvah to follow what the Chachamim say. And then the Rebbe says, you're going to go ahead and say it's only the Rabbanon v'gam bahem ein ledag the yoser medai shekein the Rabbanon. It's only the Rabbanon. You don't have to be so over the top with them. That is one thing. But aval chumras chadoshes v'adayin l'chapes. Don't go ahead looking for new chumras. And they quote what the Yerushalmi says, and we're going to explain this Yerushalmi later on. Dayach ma'ashasul l'chatorah. It's sufficient, but the Torah said that's prohibited. Don't go ahead and look for more chumras. And that's what he says. Mavim heim mechachol devrei min amr Yerushalmi. Sha'adam yidrosh limsar din v'cheshmal kol dvar Michael shera v'lo yachol menu. So we see that adrab, a person is supposed to avail themselves and use everything that he can. Yes, it's very hard to do everything. Follow everything, a single halacha, everything midaraisa, everything midarabanan. It's very hard. So don't pile up more. You're going to pile up more. It's going to make it even more difficult. Like kedai laharbes b'chumras v'yidurim, because what's going to happen? You're going to collapse under everything, and even the quote unquote important things you won't do. B'glolam all lodm chashom lahafsin tzayikir. Chumris yiseiris alulas lahavia de'aziva gemuras derech haTorah chas v'sholom. That's what these people complain. And what's the proof from it? So we know the story with the Eitz Hadas. And mevi mechacha lekach mechet Eitz Hadas shoyrish kol hachetoim shekesheteitzah mitesefes isur shakadosh baruch hu loy tzivam, that it says loy sigu boy. Chava went ahead and told the snake that we shouldn't touch it. In addition to what it says, you shouldn't eat from it, because then the snake pushed her against the tree, and she saw, and he told her, "Kishem shebenegia," nothing happened. Just like when you touched it, nothing happened. So the same thing, you could eat, and nothing is going to happen. So from here, we see all types of proof that we shouldn't be adding more to the chumras that's already there in the Torah, we should not to the Rabbanans and so on. So the Rebbe says, this whole thing, like you already established before, it's a tos. Gimel, Ram, Tainezu, Betos, Gedol, Yisoidam. V'tshuva l'davar. What's the answer for everything that we just now said? Kulam miroye echad nitnu. Just like a person is not going to go ahead and differentiate between one mitzvah in the Torah or another mitzvah in the Torah, we say they were all given from one shepherd, they were all given from Moshe Rabbeinu. The same thing, all the chumras and all the siyagim that come about in later years are also considered that they were given from Moshe Rabbeinu. How come? Beglal halav shaloi taser, like we said before, there is a negative commandment. A person is not allowed to not listen to what the Chachomim say in every generation. Yesh gam legzeiros derabanan toikev v'chomer shel dinim da'oraisa. It's not that if chas v'sholom someone says, this is not so terrible if I transgress, because only Chachamim said it. But that, it's terrible. Let's say he's murder these days is the Rabbanon. Matzah is the Raisa. So he's going to say, I'll make sure to eat matzah these days because that's Minat Torah. Murder, it's a Rabbanon. It's not so terrible. He says, it's exactly as bad as not eating matzah. Why? Because it says, you should not turn away from anything that Chacham tell you. So if a person doesn't eat the maror, he's transgressing what the Torah said. Don't turn away from what the Chacham told you. But L'poil, if we look in Halacha, we look in Gemara, we see that the Chacham themselves made certain differences between something that's Minat Torah, something with Rabbanan. Have daily halachas bein deraisel derabanan he mipnei shekach roitze atoyra shebederaisi yesafek el chumra bederabanan sveike lahakol. There is a one of the rules that differentiates a minat Torah and miderabanan is that if something is minat Torah, so the din is safek deraisa l'chumra. If there's a doubt about a Torah din, so then we have to be more stringent. You don't know if you did it, you got to do it again. If it's a doubt in a Rabbanon din, so then we say Safek Rabbanon L'Kula. So you might think, oh, give a look. That shows that the Rabbanon is easier, it's not as important as a Deraisa. So the Rebbe says, no. Torah itself made that rule. Torah itself said that when it comes to the Rabbanon, I give you this particular situation, the Rabbanon, you're makel. When it's a Minat Torah, you're machmir. But it's not because chas v'sholem or midrabanan is any less important than something Minat Torah. That is about gedorim and gezeuros and siyagim and fences that Chachomim did. But we also started off saying at the beginning that when it says asu siyag la-Torah, it's not only the Chachomim. It means each individual is obligated to make for themselves a fence, to make for themselves certain types of limitations to keep themselves away from doing something wrong. It says 2 paragraphs on the end of the page. Why? Seemingly, again, I could say, Mela, I won't apply this to me. I'll just keep exactly what it says in Shulchan Aruch, but I won't add anything from my own personal gates like it says in Pirkei Avos. So he says, no. This is also something that we have in this week's parsha. Just like we know you're supposed to follow what the Rabbanon said, because it says the same thing in this week's parsha. It says Shmartim es mishmarti, and the Chachamim said, what does Shmartim es mishmarti means? Make gates, make siyagim, make preventative measures. Every person according to their own way to protect that they keep in the right way to do things. Now the Rebbe adds, there's another idea. Another idea of even withholding things that are permitted. There's another mitzvah. There's a mitzvah essa that's brought down, says, you shall be holy and you shall become holy. So there is a Chazal, and also the Alter Rebbe brings us down in Tanya, that this means there's a positive commandment in the Torah, even in something that's mutter, you should make yourself holy. Meaning, even in something that is permitted, a person should say, just because it's permitted, I don't need to avail myself of it. So, nichlo adavar gam b'mishmarti mishmarti asud mishmeres l'mishmeres. This is also included in this idea of making a gate for a gate, or making a protection around the protection. So now, back to what we said before, there was the Yerushalmi. The Yerushalmi said that a person is going to have to answer for anything that he had an opportunity in this world to take and to have benefit from, and he didn't eat. And the same thing we had about the Chetes Hadas, but because she said, don't touch it, so therefore from that came out the whole Aveda. So if so, from this we learn out that you shouldn't make too many gates. So he says, the Klappe, Choches Meir Yerushalmi Mechetes Hadas, Tshuva, the answer is as follows. Adam Arishon b'Yosef b'Gan Eden haya merkava lalakus. He was a vehicle for godliness, meaning his whole being was about fulfilling Hashem's will. Nothing of bad could touch him. Gan Eden itself, the location of Gan Eden, does not condone and does not allow for anything bad. And the proof of it is, Chassidus explains that why did Adam Arishon have to be kicked out of Gan Eden? Seemingly, either he should have died, like it says, in the day that you eat from it, you'll die. But in Gan Eden, what's this idea? You had to be kicked out. He said you had to be kicked out because Gan Eden couldn't handle it. There's also an expression concerning Eretz Yisrael that when Yidden did Averis in Eretz Yisrael, so the Eretz Yisrael was sok taki ha'aretz oisam. That says that the Eretz Yisrael should not vomit you up. In other words, just like something that a person can't digest, so there is the person will vomit it up. The same thing, Gan Eden, anything having to do with negativity, anything having to do with bad, cannot be handled by Gan Eden. So therefore, Adam Arishon, including where he was located, had nothing to do with bad. Merkava, someone, a tzaddik that is called a vehicle for godliness, and the same thing, the simple meaning of a Merkava is kol masayim berotz naroichiv. A chariot, a vehicle, it's only following what its rider wants it to do. Ulefichach ein kamokim legdorim v'syagim mishum she'ein chshash shel kisholim. There is no room for making any fences. You don't have to be worried. You don't have to protect anything. You're completely in tune with what Hashem wants you to do. So, but what's going to hurt if you make Gedorim? Here we saw that Gedorim damaged. So he said, in a case where a person is completely devoted to Hashem, so then just the opposite. When it comes to things that are protections, those can damage. Not only are they extra, they also are a deficiency. Why? Someone that's completely devoted to godliness, everything he does is holy. The person that is completely connected to godliness, when he engages with anything, he automatically lifts it up to his level. He's connected to Hashem, so anything he engages with, he lifts up to Hashem as well. And when he is not involved with something, which he could have been involved with, so it comes out that he is now preventing this from becoming elevated. And an example of things that become elevated through holiness is Dugmas Achilas Kotrim, Achilas Shabbos v'cholu. When the Koyanim eat from the Karbonis, or when a Yid eats food on Shabbos, so automatically, because it's a mitzvah, so those things become elevated. The same thing, someone that's a Merkava Lalakus, anything that he eats or anything that he does is elevated like a mitzvah of eating on Shabbos, like a mitzvah of eating korbanos. So there was the reason why we're asked, did you eat everything that you saw? And that's why by Adam Rishon he wasn't supposed to add any new fences. But in the place where there's a need for it, so then they are beneficial and they are necessary, and a person has to do so, just like we have, like we said in our parsha, v'shmartem v'shmishmarti. Okay, that was on Parshas Achrei. Now a sikha on Parshas Kedoshim, which to a certain degree also relates to it, because it talks about the Kedoshim part, but it's a different component and aspect of Kedoshim. Shloishes hatzivuyim arishonim betchilas Parshas Seinu at the beginning of Parshas Kedoshim. Aleph is Kedoshim to you. You shall be holy. Beis ish imay v'avitiro. In other words, kibud ava'im. And 3, Eshab soisei tishmoiru. B'toira ba, they call Dover b'Takonos, everything is exact. V'hechrech eifir loymar, shegam be'uvda sheshloishes sivuyim elu mefim yachad, yesh Takonos v'kshurim em zeh b'zeh. We must say that they are exact and they are connected one to another. Mashma'usa shel kedusha kanhi havdalah. What does it mean, kedusha? Holiness. So the Alter Rebbe explains in Tanya, and here is one of the sources for it. Holy is like a word that doesn't have really a good explanation. How do you define what holiness is? So holiness means anything that is removed, anything that's separated, anything that's distinct from other things. So we see that Kedusha is related to the fact that the Jewish people are separated from the nations. Yidden have an obligation to be distinct, to be separate. Like it says, that we'll be distinct and separate, I and your nation, from every nation that's on the face of the earth. So that's what a Yid is about. Kedoshim to you. We need to be distinct. So now the Rebbe says like this. What are we referring to? Are we referring to a distinction that's obvious? Then it's not a matter of distinction. Havdalah drusha masima rak biyachas li'inyonim shemebchina chitzonius heim doimim. Where is the term separation and distinction apply? If two things are similar externally, then you say, but this is like that and this is like that. You don't have to make a distinction between a house and a chair, because there's nothing similar between them. You're not going to say, this house is so different, it's different than a chair. A house and a chair are completely different. When you make a distinction, you say, this house and that house are different. This chair and that chair are different. This house like this and this house like that. When we say that Yidden have to be holy, it's not referring to things that they are completely different than non-Jews. The Torah mitzvahs, that's not applicable to say, make a distinction. Non-Jews don't have anything to do with Torah mitzvahs. That whole concept doesn't apply by them. Ka'amor, like it says, Magid Dvarav li Yaakov, he tells over his laws and his words to Yaakov, Loi asachen l'chol goy. He didn't do this to any other nation. Only Yidden have this distinction, or something that's beyond distinction, that Yidden have Torah mitzvahs. Kamed duber, but rather, kamed duber b'divrei reshus. Where do you have to make distinctions? Not in matters of Torah mitzvahs, but in permitted things. Achila, shtia, mischar, eating, drinking, business, dvarim shel gabeim, doimim Yehudim l'choram, mebchina chitzonius la'am machedim. Things that externally we seem to be no different than non-Jews. B'yachas l'kachem eretz ha-Torah kedoshim to you. Here is where Torah says, be distinct. Be holy. Let's see the difference, the way you do business, the way you eat, than the way someone else does. How is it possible that there should be holiness also these days, also when he finds himself in this world, and especially in the time of a double and quadruple darkness of Golus. Klapikach nemar ki kodesh ani. We have a special energy. We have the energy of Hashem that transcends everything, because I am holy, Hashem says. B'chol makim shebnei Yisrael nimtzoim hareim kshurim hakadosh baruch hu. They're always and everywhere connected with Hashem. Im ata kodesh. They're connected with you. That's holy. Ulefichachem goy kodesh ad doime l'kedushos shel hakadosh baruch hu. They're as holy as Hashem. Yachol kamayni b'nichusa. We say Yachol kamayni. It says Kedoshim tiyu. You should be holy. Ki kadosh ani. So there's a Maimer Chazal who says Yachol kamayni. You would think that would be like me. And in the simple reading of that Maimer Chazal is Yachol kamayni means that we're not as holy as Hashem. But other places say, no, Yachol kamayni is a statement. Don't read it as a question and an answer that said no, but it's just the opposite brought down. That we could be as holy as the Eibishter. B'nichusa. This is a statement. So therefore, even when we're amongst the Goyim, even when we're in Golus, even when we're in a Chayshach Kafel Mechupel, we could still be distinct, even in our ordinary mundane things, that in those things we look like a Chas V'Shalom non-Jew. After establishing this, it's not just I should be holy. Like was said by Avram. Why did Hashem consider it for Avram Avinu a tzedakah, a righteousness? Because I knew that he is going to communicate this to his children. He is going to communicate this to his family. He's going to communicate it to his household. That's why the second mitzvah in the parsha that talks about right after Kedoshim Tiyu says every person has to fear his mother and his father. Hinted the obligation of chinuch. Who are the first person that teach a kid before they go to Jem's preschool? Who are the ones? His father and mother. It's incumbent upon them. Don't wait till they're sent to school. Don't wait till they go to yeshiva. It's incumbent upon them to make the children permeated as with the feeling. They have to know right away from day one that they are different. They're a holy nation. And that's why it's a very interesting order in the pasuk. Seder HaKosavu imay va'aviv. It says his mother and his father you should fear. Why mother first? Because when it comes to the idea of Jewish education, it starts with the mother. Ha'em kodemes mishum shehi akeres habayis ve'ikar hachinuch bepoel nosim biyada. She is the one that's at home with the children. She is the mainstay of the home. The main chinuch is through her. So therefore, since we're talking about this holiness and this distinction of the Jewish people, how does that start? That starts from the mother. So where do we get the energy to be able to do this from? So here comes the third mitzvah, Shabbos. How do we reach that state of being distinct? You should watch and guard our Shabbos. It's a sign between Hashem and the Jewish people. It marks and it strengthens the idea that the world was created by Hashem. And as this is why we have to keep Shabbos every week. Shabbos every week is a literal reminder that Hashem created the world. If we wouldn't have to stop every Shabbos from everything we do and make it a distinct day and make it a different day? Yeah, in the back of our mind, we learned in yeshiva, we learned from our parents that Hashem created the world. But it's not something that's knocked into our heads. But the very fact that every Friday afternoon we got to stop what we're doing and we stop for 25 hours from our mundane activities, what are we marking? What are we remembering? What are we celebrating? That Hashem created the world. So again and again and again, we're knocking into our heads the idea that Hashem is the creator. And the world did not come on its own, it came from Hashem. And He's the one that is leading it and running it the whole time. And this, the Eden are again distinct and different from other nations. Even those of the nations of the world that believe that there is a creator, but once Hashem created it, that's it. There is the natural world, it's run by the rules of nature. Hashem gave over the world to the rules of nature. Hashem is not involved anymore. He doesn't do miracles. He doesn't manifest Himself in nature. A Yid does not believe that. Through their faith and belief, they're connected with Hashem. It's beyond nature. And just the opposite. When it comes to nature, that's not something that we bring into our calculations when it comes to Yiddishkeit and transmitting ideas to our children and so on. When you see signs on the heavens, don't worry, don't be scared. But that's something that the non-Jews are fearful of. This is what Shabbos teaches us. And this is what Shabbos is advantage over the 6 days of the week. When you open up Chumash Bereshis and you see about how Hashem created the world, 32 times it says the name Elokim. Bereshis bara Elokim as-shamayim v'sa'aretz vayam Elokim yiyoyer vayam Elokim yirokia vayam Elokim nasa adam etzalmeinu kitmuseinu. 32 times before the name Yud-Kei Vav-Kei is mentioned. What's the significance of the name Elokim? Aleph, Lamed, Hey, Yud, Mem is the Gematria Shbegematria Hateva. It's the same numerical equivalent as the word Hateva, 86 if I remember correctly. This means that the way the creation was in the way of nature. Avala Shabbos, Shabbos is beyond nature. Shabbos lahavaya, it says. Shabbos has to do with Yud-Kei Vav-Kei. Yud-Kei Vav-Kei is a combination of three words. Hoya, hoive, v'yiyah. Which means that the past, the present, the future was, is, and will be is ke'echad. How is that possible? Because it's beyond nature. Shabbos communicates and draws down the beyond nature to us. HaShabbos nitna rakli Yisrael. Only a Jew has Shabbos. Not the nations of the world. The Akum Shabbos Chayev Misa. He has the whole idea of Shabbos has no connection with him, and if he connects himself to Shabbos, he doesn't have like a connection with life anymore. The non-Jews are connected with the name Elokim. They don't have a connection with the name of Yud-Kei Vav-Kei. We know that Shabbos comes to commemorate two things. One thing that Shabbos comes to commemorate is Maaseh Bereshis, the creation. We say it in davening, Zeichel Maaseh Bereshis. We also say, in the Kiddush of Shabbos, and also in davening, we say, Zeichel Yetzias Mitzrayim. In the Aseret HaDibros, we say both in Yom. In other words, Shabbos is both a commemoration and reminding us that Hashem created the world, and also our separation and our being taken out of Mitzrayim, which means beyond nature. Yitzias Mitzrayim, Yitzia Mechol Mitzarim Vagvul Shal Teva. Mitzrayim is a play on the word Mitzarim, boundaries, constraints, that Hashem takes us out of all constraints of nature. That a Jew is be'etzem higher than nature, which a non-Jew does not have that. Through that guarding of that message. Guarding and keeping the sign and this bond between the Yid and Hashem, which is beyond nature. How is that? We have to believe that the Jewish people are not under the rulership of nature. We have to have permeated in our minds and feelings and our hearts that we are only directed by Hashem, that's beyond nature. So a person then creates both within himself and within his family and his children the idea that we are distinct, we are holy. Because we realize the whole physical world is not about the physical laws of nature. He has a strong belief this physicality is connected with Kedoshim Hashem. Maybe it's supposed to say Behemshech Hadvarim Namar. Shabsoisei Tishmoiru Mikdashi Tiro Samach Shabbos LeMikdash, the Chazal say. That the Eibishter put together in the Torah the mitzvah of Shabbos and the mitzvah of the Beis HaMikdash. How come? Because when you have this idea of Shabbos, this leads you to the Beis HaMikdash. Then he's permeated with that idea. Everything that he does in this world becomes a home and a sanctuary for Hashem.